here for afternoon tea with Amy Ferguson and Emily LoPresto. You are in the right spot. Welcome, we're glad you're here with us. If this is your first time tuning in, my name's Elizabeth. I am the Gallery and Program Manager with the Guild. We developed these programs early last month to kind of create an opportunity for artists and art lovers to connect during this time of social distancing. As a viewer, you'll have a chance to tour artist studios, watch them demo their work, shop for artwork, and more. Each program's a little different from the last, so we encourage you guys to check them all out, either live like you are now on Zoom or Facebook Live, or you can watch the recorded versions later on our YouTube channel. It's the Guild of Artists and Artisans YouTube channel. So before we dive into today's program, I have a couple of things I want to make you guys aware of. If you're watching on Zoom, we would love if you guys leave comments and questions and engage with us. There is a comment section in the right side of your screen if you're on a laptop. And there's also a question button at the bottom. If you're going to leave comments, you have a couple options. You'll see there's a little drop down when you leave a comment, and it's defaulted for you to comment just to panelists, which would be me, Emily, and Amy. If you want, it's just us that can see those comments though. So if you want to engage with everyone, we would encourage you to do the drop down and hit to comment to all panelists and attendees. So just a little note that I'd like to make. So that's that. And then I also, you may know, we've been doing a Happy Little Videos Bob Ross art competition. So I want to take a couple minutes here at the beginning of our program to share the winners. So we've over this past month, we have encouraged artists to submit a video of themselves creating art in their studio. These videos were to be inspired by Bob Ross in some way, whether it be his signature look, his hosting style, or his subject matter. The Guild selected the top videos early last week, and over this past week, we have opened the floor up for you guys, the public, to vote for your favorite. So I am going to announce the winners live now. So drum roll, please. All right, first place for the Happy Little Videos Bob Ross art competition goes to Ted July with his video, Turning a Log on a Lathe. Congratulations, Ted. Second place here goes to Richard Cooley with his video, Spark Plug Guy. Congratulations, Richard. And then last but not least, our third place award goes to James Parker with his video, A Look Inside the Photographer's Studio. So congratulations, James. Congratulations to all three of you guys. We're so happy that you submitted your videos, and we'd like to thank everyone who participated in this voting process. So this was kind of a fun thing for us to do this past week. And if you haven't seen the videos yet, you can still check them out either on the Guild's YouTube channel, or you can check them out on the Guild's Facebook page. So congratulations again. And we are going to move along to our program now. I won't take up too much time. So today we have a really fun program planned for you. It's an afternoon tea program hosted by artists and friends Amy Ferguson and Emily LoPresto. They will both be coming to you live from their respective homes for afternoon tea and art demos. And to give you a little bit of background, if you don't know Amy and Emily, they met on their first day of college, actually, at the College for Creative Studies in Detroit, and they were roommates for 3 years after that. So Amy has a degree in illustration and Emily has a degree in crafts with a focus on ceramics. They graduated in 2015 and they've been friends ever since. You probably have seen them at some of our art fairs if you've checked those out. Both ladies work full-time doing shows. This would have been Amy's 5th year, and then this would have been Emily's 2nd year of doing shows. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull both of them up so they can say hi to you and give you a little background before they start their program. Hi, Emily.
Hi. Hello, am I unmuted?
Hi.
Hello.
I got my tea.
Awesome, welcome. Thank you guys so much for putting this on today. I'm gonna let you guys tell a little bit about yourself before you dive in. So I'll let you take it from here.
Okay,
Who
so
goes first?
Emily.
You can go first,
I'll
Emily.
go first. So I'm Emily LoPresto. I am a ceramic artist. Amy and I are both drinking out of my cups. And as said, I've been doing shows for, this would have been my second full year. I did a half a year of shows, and then a full year, and this would have been my second full year. And this is my studio, which is in the basement of my home. So I'm very lucky in this time to have my studio accessible. And thank you. And Amy and I have been friends for how many years it's been, since 2011.
9 years. Wow.
And we talk all the time, and she's the one who got me into doing shows. So take it away, Amy.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, there's actually 2 of us here. Look, it's my mom, everyone. If you've seen us at shows, you know that my mom does all the shows with me. So she's going to be doing all the camera work and hopefully reminding me if I forget to say something that she knows I was trying to remember to say. But yeah, I do printmaking and drawing and digital work. This is going to be mainly just my only just my printmaking studio, which is actually at her house. I'm staying with them right now for reasons, but anyway. So yeah, I'm going to show you a printmaking demo, and I think, yeah, I'm the first one going. So, oh, okay.
Oh, there's Emily.
So here we go.
Bye, Emily.
I'm going to put my tea down, and we're going to get started. So we're going to flip the camera. And now you have the camera, Mother. All right. So this is the basement studio for printmaking. I have a little corner of the room here that my parents let me kind of take over, which is really great because printmaking needs a lot of equipment and a lot of space, which I don't have at my apartment. I started doing printmaking my senior year at CCS, and it was kind of, I did it as an elective. I took like intro to printmaking, and I just fell in love with it. I had already been doing drawing and digital work, but I figured that the printmaking and etching specifically really lends itself to my detailed drawing work. So I started doing it in the intro class, and it was just so fun. So once I graduated, I lost the access to all the equipment from the school, so I spent a year kind of buying up what I could, a press. Actually, I have 2 presses. I'll show you both of them. So I had to spend time getting all the equipment I needed to do this, to keep going, because I really didn't want to stop. And there's not a lot of places you can go to do specifically intaglio etching. So yeah, anyway, we're going to start with kind of just like little parts of the studio, and I will be pulling a print for you from one of my very brand new etching plates. So now we're going to go over here. We're going to start at the paper table. This table is mainly used for there's no ink that's ever allowed on this table, only paper. I kind of tried to model my studio after the studio at CCS. This is by no means a professionally like done studio. This is just what I managed to do in a basement. So at CCS, everything was like top notch, but I tried still to do what they did. So we used to have a table just for paper, and you can never put ink on it. So I never put ink on this table. This is where I prepare the paper I use for etching. Because I always start, when I go to pull prints down here, I start by preparing the paper. So you have to actually hand tear the paper. You don't have to, but a lot of printmakers hand tear paper for aesthetic reasons. The edge is called deckled when it's torn, or just like the edge of the paper when it's or all paper has like an edge to it that's kind of rough. You can usually see the layers and textures of the paper, and it's a more traditional thing to do. I'm going to quickly just like tear this piece. I already have pieces that are pre-torn, but I'll show you what that does. That's how you hand tear paper. This is a tear bar, which I'm actually going to move out of the way. And then I also use the second side of this table to, I usually lay out the pieces of copper that I'm using that day.
Paper piles.
And yeah, and these are my little piles of pre-torn paper. I mainly do either paper that's 11 by 14 or 8 by 10. I use 2 different types of paper, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But here are some of my copper plates. So I do copper plate etching. And these all actually start with like a pencil drawing that I then transfer onto the copper, which is a whole nother process I'm not going to show today. But these are already etched. And I transfer the drawing onto, and I make the etching plates. I do an acid etch process with an acid tank that's upstairs.
In the hall closet?
Yeah, in the hall closet.
Under the coats. You got to be careful. No long coats in our front hall
yeah,
closet.
Once again, this is not the most super professional place, but so yes, these are a lot of my copper plates. I usually don't have this many laid out. I also do them in batches based on the color I'm going to print that day. So like today I'm printing in the ink color of black. So I'll be, like I would then print all the prints that I needed to print with black ink that day. And then the next day I might work on prints that need to be printed with green ink. You can't exactly see them very well because of the,
really coming out.
Oh, really?
Well. Yeah.
Cool. Because this plate doesn't have any ink in it. Once I put the ink in it a little bit later, you'll be able to see a bit better. But the image is inside of is like in the copper. It's etched into the surface
With an etching needle.
Yeah. So over here, this is the soaking tub for the paper, which I'll show when I actually get the paper out. Actually, we're gonna slip a piece of paper right in there to get it ready. But we're actually gonna move over here next.
Want to show the supply table here?
Oh yeah, here's some more printmaking supplies, cleaning products, both safe and then more intense, like mineral spirits and acetone in like containers that are safe for flammable material. These are like little ink packets. When I make ink, when I use the ink and I mix it up, I try to save it for the next time if I really liked the color I was using. So you can like preserve it in little wax paper bundles. Palette knives, Q-tips, all sorts of stuff that I use down here, gloves. That's over there. I have a drawer full of my ink under this table. And then this table is the messy table for ink. All sorts of messy ink stuff happens over here.
The magic happens.
Yeah.
Here.
So, I think I'm going to ink this plate, and then I'll talk a bit more about the paper in a second when I go to actually use the paper for this. So here is the plate. This has already been inked today because I was already printing it, but this is the print we're gonna pull. This is a brand new, the Dawn Shredder etching plate I made yesterday. And these are all now available on Etsy. I have 4 new etchings that I've made this week. And we're going to pull a print. So I'm going to try and talk about what I'm doing while I'm doing it. So when you're pulling an etching print, this is different from what a lot of people know with printmaking. Is usually like they know what a letterpress is, or they know what a lino cut is, which is where you're carving into a surface and then you roll ink on the surface and that's what prints, like a stamp. With an etching, it's reversed. So I'm going to be scraping ink into the surface of the plate, and the ink's going to go down into where the etched image is, into like these little grooves, lines that I made with my etching needle previously. And then I'm going to be wiping the ink off. So we're going to actually start that. So here's my ink that's actually been sitting around a little bit. You want to make sure it's a bit more elastic. Some ink automatically comes out pretty elastic, but if it hasn't been moved around in a little bit, you want it to be able to be kind of, yeah, this ink's pretty elastic. There's like substances you can add to the ink to make it more elastic. So fun. I've never actually showed anyone this because we're just like in the basement. And it's not the most, like, the lighting in here is a little weird, so I don't usually post a lot about this. So I'm glad you guys are here to see it. So I'm going to take some black ink. It's actually kind of black-brown because straight black ink to me is kind of flat, but I add a little bit of brown to it to make it a little more. And so I'm going to scrape the ink over the surface of this plate. And you're like, oh my gosh, she's covering up the whole image. Yes, you have to cover the whole plate with this ink. All the way to the edge. The plate is sitting on like this stuff that you put in your drawer in your kitchen to make it so stuff doesn't move around.
It's like a rubber gripper.
Yeah, I don't know what it's called, but I get it at like the kitchen store. So here, this plate is interesting because I have a little border on it, so I really have to make sure the ink gets to all the sides of it.
And that was a new thing for you to put a border on an etching, which is cool.
Okay, so now it's all covered with ink. and then you scrape off with this scraper, which is not all of it by any means.
I'm gonna try coming around here.
Oh, okay.
No, you're fine.
Okay. So you kind of get as much as you can. You can kind of start to see the image emerge.
The question is, do you sell the copper plate original?
Oh, someday I do imagine selling the copper, but only after the edition is done. And I would need the help of like a metals artist to help me like patina it to show the etching, like to make the lines show up. And I'd have to like immortalize it in a way that it couldn't be, like no one else could ever make prints from it. But I have thought of that. But I haven't gotten to the end of any of the editions yet. So that hasn't come up like at the top of my list yet.
Somebody just asked another question.
Elizabeth's going to tell me about
Okay.
that. So I've wiped off as much as I can, and now I'm going to take this tarlatan, which is kind of like a cheesecloth. It looks just like a new piece is just kind of like this. And then when it's been used a lot, it looks like this. It gets really kind of softer, but this helps wipe the ink off of the surface without damaging the surface, because with an etching, any accidental scratch or any sort of like mar on the surface will print with ink. Like, so I have to be really careful with all these plates I have. I keep them all safe here in the basement in a file so that they don't get damaged, because if I like accidentally got a big scratch over one of these, it would be ruined. That's why I never take these to shows either. Like, I only ever just take the etching plates, or not the etching plates. I only ever take the etching prints to shows.
And if the house is burning down, we know right where.
Yeah, Mom knows where the
Rescue
etchings
the
are. She knows how to rescue them.
Save the Cornish game hens.
Oh my gosh. So anyway, here I am wiping, and you can see the image start to emerge. So this is kind of, it'll show you, like if I went to print it like this, all this ink would show up. So I got to keep wiping. And so for really large plates, this process like of the wiping can take up to 15 minutes of just wiping off the surface. This is a pretty small plate. I do make smaller plates than this, but my biggest plate is like 9 by 12, and that was way too big. I should have never done that. But that's why I work a bit, I used to work a lot larger, and now I work a bit smaller. Also because this studio is not where I live. It's at my parents' house, so I don't have access to it all the time. Like normally I come over here like maybe like on one day in between shows during the summer just to like print all day, and then I have to go home and work on other stuff. But I haven't had endless time to be over here before. So you keep going because you can see.
Here, I'm trying to get really clear.
Yeah, it's kind of hard. You have to. I can kind of see where I've wiped. It's like which direction the ink is being wiped, so I have to switch direction a bit. But you can see the image, which is cool when it has ink in it. Still going. The small plates, the smallest plates I make are 2 inches by 2 inches, and those take me like about a minute to wipe. They're pretty quick. I love doing those because I can do a whole bunch at once. Still going.
I have a question for you, Amy.
Sure.
So with a plate that size, how long does it typically take you to do the etching?
So by the time I get to the etching, I've already done the drawing before. So I already drew this. This was a pen and ink drawing that's sold already, but I put the majority of the work into that because I was figuring out the drawing. Once I get to the actual etching, I probably worked on this plate for about 2 days. And I had a fresh needle when I worked on this, so it was like this really fine, sharp needle that made this plate look really, really good. But yeah, about 2 days of working on the image on the copper, and then probably another 2 days working on the actual ink drawing that I made. So yeah,
Cool,
that's
thanks.
a good answer.
There's so many steps in this process.
Yeah, like this is like just
she's
one
already,
of the steps,
she's
and this
already
step
spent-
has like 4 steps.
She's already spent hours of it with the drawing and then the etching and the acid bath. You haven't seen any of that.
Yeah.
That's already all
That's okay.
happened before this part, so it's very cool.
So this at this
Is it
point, it's been wiped to my satisfaction, and so now I have to make sure that there's not a lot of ink. I have to wipe the edges of the plate. So the plate edges have been beveled. That's the first step when you go to prepare the piece of copper. You have to bevel the edges, because the printing press uses so much pressure that if the plate edges weren't beveled, it would like cut through the paper. So
you need a Q-tip?
Well, the Q-tip's at the next part.
Okay.
So I have to take a rag and wipe the edges clean, because you don't want any excess ink to be printed on the paper. Watch, this one will like have some sort of ink that I didn't plan for or something. Also, it's good to try and get it
in regards to
Sure.
The wiping process. So Ryan wants to know, does it just get better and better with the wiping over time?
Yep.
Is the few minutes you mentioned the optimal? Do you have any examples when not enough time is given to wiping?
I don't have a print like to show that it hasn't been wiped enough, but if it hasn't been wiped enough, there's also more of what's called a plate tone in the print. So like the whole plate would have like instead of the paper showing through authentically, it would have like a tone of that color of ink over where I didn't wipe enough. And there'd also be like kind of, not scratches, but the ink would look kind of textury, because it's still going to get squished into the paper, but you would be able to tell if I see, but I never forget to wipe it all off, so I don't have an example to show. But it does get better the more you wipe. Some people actually, after using tarlatan, take a piece of newsprint and wipe with that too, with their fingers. Like, but I don't usually. I did that a couple of times, and it's just like I felt like I could find the point where I sometimes even liked a little bit of plate tone occasionally if I forgot a little bit of a corner or something. But yeah, I hope that's a good answer.
Yeah, no, that definitely is. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so we wiped the edges, and now we're going to take the plate over to the printing press, which doesn't have a name, but it should, because I love it.
Ta-da!
This is a pretty big press. This press weighs about 400 pounds. It needs to weigh a lot because it needs to be able to exert a lot of pressure, because that's what makes the print into the paper. So I'm going to, actually you can come over here.
I'm just showing the whole big, and then on the big card it's on. Okay.
Yeah.
Back on this side.
I found this on Facebook for sale, which was like a miracle. I couldn't believe it. So this press has a press bed that's about 18 by 36 inches. And I printed out this grid that's on paper, which is underneath a piece of Lexan, which is like a really strong polycarbonate plastic that has like, I think it's like 250 times stronger than glass or something, so it can actually withstand the pressure. And it lets me have a guide as to know where to put the etching on the press bed. So I use this red line as a center. I off-center my plate on the press because I used to have a lot of problems with the prints not being even. So like the prints would have, one side of the print would be really dark and the other side would be kind of light, like faded. And that's because one side of this press has a star wheel. The other. So I print towards the side with the star wheel. I don't know if other people do that or not, but I do. So I still don't really consider myself a super expert, but I do what I can. So I take this Q-tip and I go around the edges again, because you could never be too careful.
And look, there's still more ink. It's amazing.
Yeah, there's always ink that comes off, no matter how much you think you wiped it. So this is on the bread. It can stay here for a little bit so we can talk about the paper. I'm using oil-based ink, so it doesn't dry really fast. So like I can, go eat lunch or something not now, but like it doesn't have to be instant when you put stuff when you put the ink in the plate or when you're cleaning up. Like that ink will sit here all day on this glass palette.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're gonna get the paper. I use 2 different types of paper. The paper has to be soaked in water because the paper has to be wet to receive the image. The wet paper is really good at picking up every single detail of the plate. But the paper has to be soaked to get the sizing out of it, and sizing is kind of like glue. So different paper has different times. So the white paper I use is BFK Reeves watercolor paper. And this has to be soaked for at least 30 minutes. I usually soak it for a lot longer. That's just my personal preference. And this more yellowish paper is domestic etch. And this can be soaked for 5 minutes. This is what I was told at school. It's kind of hard to find this information online. But when I was at school, they said 5 minutes for domestic etch and 30 for BFK. So we're going to use the domestic etch because I like this paper because somehow the prints just print a lot darker on this than on the white paper. But I use the white paper when I want for my big etchings and for my ones I want to then hand color afterwards because I use watercolor. So I can watercolor easily on that paper because that's what it's for.
And now you're putting it under.
Yeah, so now it's soaking wet. So I have to kind of remove some of the water quickly with the blankets.
While you're doing that, Amy, I have another question for you.
Sure.
Your 5-minute warning to Emily's time.
Okay.
So another question here. So for people looking at starting, you mentioned the challenge of moving out of college and not having a press at home. So you mentioned that you found yours. Did you say you found it on Craigslist?
On Facebook.
On Facebook. Okay. So if other people are looking for a press, do you have suggestions for where they would look?
Yeah, so actually both presses I have bought on a Facebook page that's called Printmakers Unite, and there's an exclamation point after the Unite. And it's kind of it's not like a super active Facebook page, but it's active enough to where I was able to, like, people posted presses for sale there. There's another page online for art fair artists called the Art Fair Garage Group or the Artists Garage page or something on Facebook. We can figure that out. But that's another place where I've seen presses for sale because it's like artists all over the country who are posting stuff that they have. And I've seen presses on that page and I'm like, I want to buy that, but I already have two. But like, anyway. But yeah, Printmakers Unite is where I found both of mine.
Okay, go.
So, yeah, so the paper is ready to go on top of the plate. And I'm using my two guides here.
I forgot I have to be on this side.
The other side. To put the paper over the etching lined up. This piece of newsprint catches some of the moisture and any sort of ink that might be there. The blankets here cushion and they help transfer the printing pressure from the press to the paper and plate area. They help make the print more even. So now it's time to actually turn the wheel, which can be kind of awkward when the plate's really big because there's so much pressure.
And then she uses her foot and she kicks one of them because it's too. There you go. Ta-da.
So this press is already adjusted. I use these two little things that are sticking out of the top of both sides of the cylinder. I'll show you. Like this gets turned to adjust the pressure on both sides and it goes down and it pushes on this big cylinder. And now we're gonna reveal.
This
part's really fun, especially when it's a new piece. Like when it's like the first time I've ever pulled a print, it's like exhilarating. Like my heart rate goes up. So now
here we go.
You pull the print off, and you've got.
Whoops! Wait a minute.
Voila. There's the print, and then the plate next to it, so you can see it. It's a reverse image. It's really messy underneath the plate. The back of the plate's messy and inky, but the surface for the etching is perfect. Ta-da! So there's your etching print, and here's some more etching prints also. I have a whole lot. They're all on Etsy. They're all in stock. There's some that I watercolor, some I add little glitter to. They're all different sizes.
Wait, I'm going to show some of the
But
ones.
the most important thing to remember is that for every print I make, I have to do that process. I can't then print another print from that plate. I have to go through and ink it again. So it's very labor intensive, and it's fun though. It's rewarding, and it's fun every time I pull a print. It's like every print is still exciting. That's one of the things about printmaking. It's addicting.
Oh, I love this thing.
Yeah. So are there any more questions?
That was everything for right now. You're getting a lot of awesome comments though that you'll have to check out afterwards. So everyone's loving watching the process and loving seeing your work. That was awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for watching.
Awesome. So I will go ahead and bring up Emily unless there's anything else you'd like to mention before we switch over.
I mean, just that these 4 that she's showing right now, these are my brand new ones. So if you followed me before, just know that I do have new work. Here it is. And thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much, Amy. I'm going to go ahead and bring up Emily now.
Cool.
And we'll see you in a little bit.
All right. I'll be here watching.
Hello.
Emily.
Okay, so I am doing a very time-sensitive process here, so just bear with me. And I'm gonna do a little like, here it is, and then explain later kind of thing. Oh wait, I forgot. I was supposed to be doing this over here. And I also have my setup kind of all over the place. Sorry. I staged where I'm going to be putting my iPad, so hopefully we're good. So, as I mentioned before, I am a ceramic artist. I live in Saline, Michigan, and this is my studio. So what I'm going to be doing today is talking about my prototypes. So I make all my work with a process called slip casting, and that process is using molds and liquid clay. So I'm going to be making the prototype for this mug today. It's my favorite mug. A lot of people who buy work for me prefer the larger mug. And I have never attempted to do this on video before, so I hope it works out, but if not, I can explain a lot about it. And also, I always say that working with plaster, I always say that if at first you don't succeed, try again. I often have to do things 3 times. It's just the nature of the material. A lot of people are always saying that I'm, they're like, oh, you're such a great mold maker. And I'm like, yes, I just, sometimes I have to do stuff over again. So what I'm doing right now, this right here is my kick wheel that I've probably talked about before if you've watched any of my videos. So kick wheels are wheels before they had electricity. They used kick wheels. And I have adapted it. And finally this year I adapted it where this is bolted instead of sitting on, so it falls off less. So that's great. And I use it basically as a really large turntable, as you can see. And this is where I make all of my prototypes, and I make a lot of my molds on here as well. So right now I am watching this plaster until it gets thick enough. And then I'm gonna take you back over here. So this plaster I'm gonna use to put on the outside right here so that the plaster I put inside here does not leak out. I have really bad eyesight, so Elizabeth, if anything on there I need to know about, just let me know. So this is just about right. Sorry, I just got new contacts too, and I just have given up on it. So a lot of people, when they're making their clay, when they're making it so their plaster doesn't leak, will use clay, and I prefer to use plaster because I don't like getting clay in my plaster. So this technique is something I learned from an artist named Peter Pincus with a workshop with him, where he's like, oh, just use the plaster. And I was like, oh, never thought of that. So this process is called dragging plaster. I'm gonna go ahead and put this on even though it's a little bit too thin. So this is a dam to make sure that the plaster I'm putting inside this tube doesn't leak out. I have a big box of old plaster, and that's what I always use. I put these in so that I can remove the dam quickly. So now I'm going to come on over here. This is one of those do as I say, not as I do moments. Anytime plaster dust is around, wear your respirator. So I've weighed out the plaster, and this is my plaster weighing station, and I'm adding the good plaster to the water that I'm going to be using to make the prototype. Sort of bear with me here. I measure my water and weigh all of my plaster out. So I do the math to figure out how much plaster a certain space is going to need. And then I, find the volume of it, and then I divide it by 80, and that tells me how much water I need. And then I multiply that by 3, and that tells me how many pounds of plaster I need. So I do that because it's the right way to do it, but also because it is important, or so that I never have an error where I don't make enough plaster, or I don't, it still happens, but it just makes everything go a little bit more smoothly. So this area over here, and I would also normally have my exhaust on, but it's very loud. This area over here is my plaster mixing table. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm standing right now, and I have my plaster at a height so that when I'm mixing it, I'm trying to save my back. And then when I drag plaster, I sit so that I'm right on top of it and I can see it. So now that the plaster has been added to the water, it needs to soak for 4 minutes. So this is the opportunity where I can explain what the hell I'm doing here for you. So, all right, so I sort of have a little thing here. So I have my other cup here to help explain. So inside this on the table, there's something that looks remarkably like this, hot glued down to the table. I started using hot glue this year. I used to do other methods, but then one day I was like, why don't I just use my hot glue then? It's got nails in it. Those nails hold the plaster in place. The hole in the middle also helps. This is laser cut, and it's acrylic, which is plastic. So that attached to the table. Then this right here is what I use to make the profile. So I design all my work in a 3D modeling program called Rhinoceros. And so I draw this and this in Rhino, and I use a function called Rail Revolve, which is a computer version of exactly what I'm going to do right now. It's remarkably fast on the computer. You just hit 3 buttons and it's done. But then I have to get it out of the computer. So I use this as the profile and this as the bottom. This is on the table. I always start with this whenever I design anything. It's just how I am. And then this is the profile. So if you follow my work, I have now 4, but 3, 4 as of today, 3 collections. So this is a bottom curve, and then I have the top curve. I can show you that. And then I have the 1 color. So like I have a whole series of things that are all remarkably similar to this shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour the plaster in here after I mix it, and then I'm going to wait until it's plastic. It goes through a chemical process. It's liquid, it's plastic, it's liquid, it's thixotropic, which means if you bump it, it'll sort of go whoop. If you add energy, it'll move. And then it's plastic, and that's what I'm aiming for. Then I have 3 minutes to cut it out. So we're almost ready to mix. I normally mix with a drill for 3 minutes, but I'm gonna mix with a drill just kind of quickly and then mix it with my hand so that you don't have to watch me mix with a drill for 3 minutes. Hopefully it'll work just fine. Someone once told me if you have a group of people in a room who all know how to mix plaster, you're gonna have 17 sides of an argument. So everybody does it slightly different. There is a way to do it. The book that I have the formula from uses quarts. I use liters, and it's just how everybody is. So I'm gonna move you back over here for the plaster mixing. Okay, so here we go. It's my drill. It's actually my mom's drill. I have 3 drills. They all work for different things. Can you hear me at all?
We can hear you. We can hear you. It's a little bit muffled where you are now, but we can still understand you.
Okay. So I have the plaster on the table here, and I'm mixing it. Now, when you mix plaster, you don't want it to whirlpool, so you don't mix it like really fast, like you would concrete or paint. You want to mix it in a way that the whole all of the plaster is moving, but you don't want to make a whirlpool because that's what brings air bubbles into the plaster. So it does take a lot of practice to figure out exactly how to mix plaster, and it always helps to have the correct tool. So the bit that's on the end of my drill is the best one that I have found so far. So I've got my timer in sight. I always make sure I can see my timer. I would love to have a drill that just turned on, and so I didn't have to hold the button, but oh well. So I'm just mixing the plaster so that it goes through the correct chemical process. And yeah, I'm watching to make sure that the whirlpool doesn't happen and that the air bubbles are up on the surface. If I had another arm, I could have the camera down for you. But I'm watching my timer. Are there any questions I can answer during this drilling part of the process?
Yeah, that was great timing, actually. So were you interested in ceramics before you went to college, or was this something that sparked in college?
So I have been interested in ceramics for most of my life. I would say for half of my life at this point, because my mom signed me up for a wheel throwing class at the Ann Arbor Art Center when I was a kid. And that's how I first got interested. I always wanted to be an artist, but I always say I always wanted to be an artist, but I couldn't draw. So I fell in love with clay. I did a bunch of wheel throwing. I had an internship at the Ann Arbor Art Center in the studio. Just 30 more seconds here. And then I found out about CTS my senior year of high school from my AP art teacher. And I don't know, I thought I would never get in. And I got in, which was very exciting. And whenever I look back at my portfolio, I'm like, oh, really? Okay, so turning around here. So I've got my plaster in here, and I'm just gonna pour it in to the pitcher, or into this is called coddles. I'm using a piece of PVC pipe right now. And then I'll elaborate more in a minute. So then this is full of plaster, so I have to clean it immediately, otherwise it dries on there. So I have a big bucket right here of water. It's like a trash can full of water. And that is what I use to clean all my plaster stuff, because if you rinse it off in your sink, it'll coat your pipes in plaster, and that's not what you want. So I can show you that. So now we are waiting for the plaster. So now we are waiting for the plaster so I can answer questions and elaborate. So I basically just sit here and stare at my timer and stare at the plaster. It's not an exact science. Sometimes it's a little early, sometimes it's a little late. This plaster is a little thin, so I hope it goes for you guys. So as you can see, it didn't leak all over the place. That's what the plaster down here helped. So I went to CCS, and I felt very lucky the entire time that I was so focused on ceramics. I had a lot of friends who changed majors 2, 3, 4 times. So I have always known ever since I took the class that ceramics was really what I wanted to do. I've always been ever since I've been in college, I've always been very interested in functional ceramics. So I make, cups, bowls, vases, plates, planters, things that you use in, I hope, your everyday life. So I'm just watching my timer, watching the plaster.
Another question for you.
Yep.
So did you come up with this process on your own, like through trial and error, or is this something that you were taught?
So this process originated from back in the day. If you look up at your ceiling, if you're not in a basement, there is, or only in some houses, but the molding that's in between your wall and your ceiling that is now made out of wood. It was initially made out of plaster. So it's like an age-old thing in Europe where people used to literally throw plaster on the ceiling, and then they would take something like this and then scrape the molding when houses were made of plaster entirely. Now they're made of drywall, which is a mixture of plaster, but it's not quite the same. So that is where the process originated. And then it was I'm not sure exactly when it was adapted into ceramics, but I initially learned it from an artist named Heather May Erickson at Penland School of Crafts the summer before my senior year, which I was very lucky to learn it then because my senior show at CCS would not be what it is today, or what it ended up being if I hadn't had that experience at Penland. So that's where I initially learned it. I learned it again the next summer from another artist. And then just by using it, you know, and experimenting and everything, I have adapted it to my own. This thing that I use, has been super engineered by me. This is not what Heather May Erickson had us make. So this is a piece of masonite, which I laser cut with a piece of flashing, which is what's in between your roof tiles and your house, which is just a thin metal. And then I cut that out just with a blade. And then it's got nails in it to keep it in place. So then this is a 1 by 1 little chunk of wood. So this piece is all laser cut as one. This one doesn't have it, but this year I started last year I started labeling them, which was like the best thing I've ever done. And so I use a laser cutter at Makerworks in Ann Arbor, which is a tech shop, which is like a gym, but instead of treadmills, they have laser cutters and band saws and chop saws. And it's a really awesome place. They do tours, not right now, obviously, but one day maybe again. So that's where I do all my laser cutting. Usually do it once or maybe twice a year. So I design everything, you know, in January when there's no shows. And then hopefully by the time April comes around, I'm all done with my molds. So this plaster's a little thin, so I hope it works out. Probably because I was distracted while I was mixing it, but that's okay. So, not ready yet. I like to be as prepared as possible. So see how this just sort of popped off? I also have Murphy's oil soap on the surface, which is a mold release. So that's really helpful. We're gonna have to wait till this is at 15 minutes. So I'm at 13 minutes. Probably gonna have to wait till 15 minutes. So I just watch my timer. I just sit in this chair and I watch the plaster, and it's still very liquid. So yeah, so this was super designed by me a little bit. And so lots of people, well, I wouldn't say lots of people, but there are plenty of people doing this, and they all have adapted it to their own way. You can only do this with slip casting. There's no reason to make a plaster prototype for throwing or hand building. So yeah, any other questions?
Yeah, so I do have one question, but first I want to remind everyone where they can go to purchase your work. So I linked to your website. Do you have work in, obviously not right now, but do you have work in other galleries and places around town as well?
I have work in the Ann Arbor Art Center gallery, and I have, I think they still have some at Found in Carytown. Then I have work in Main Street Arts in Milford, Michigan. And is that everywhere right now? I think so. And then I do shows someday in the future. And then I have a website. So I don't know if they'll put it up. Oh, Pewabic. Thank you, Amy. Yes, Pewabic also has my work. Pewabic's in Detroit on Jefferson Street. Then I have my website, which has all of my work up, and it's on a made-to-order system right now. Usually I'll have the stuff in stock, but for the most part, okay, so this is super soupy, so I'm going to show you a couple things and just keep checking on it, so that right at the end I can drag plaster for you. So since we're talking about where you can buy my work, I'm going to show you my new stuff. So in my current collections this year, I added a bunch of stuff. So this is a bottom curve creamer. So I had people asking me at shows if I made a creamer, and I do now. These are salt and pepper shakers. I'm really excited about these. This is a little jar. This is a planter. I'll show you the bottom. And then I added this little saucer plate. Amy gave me this spoon for Christmas one year. And then this is my brand new work at the bottom here. So this is what I call the Lines series. So these went live last night on my website. So right now I just have what I have in stock up on my website, and I'm gonna work on building up more stock just because they take a little bit longer. I don't wanna make people have to wait. So my website is separated by categories. Sorry, let me touch the plaster again. Almost. So I have, you know, bottom curve, top curve, lines, and then one color is where you can find my bases and my plates. So almost ready with the plaster here.
I have another question for you.
Yep.
Do you have a particular piece that's more fun to make, that you enjoy making more?
So all of the work is made exactly the same way. So the reason that I added the lines this year is because I was getting a little bit tired of the repetitiveness of the work. So every single time I cast the piece in 2 colors, I clean it up, you know, I fire it, I glaze it, you know, I wanted something that had a little bit more creativity to it. So with this, with adding the lines, it's a lot more involved, but it's a little, you know, it's still very formulaic. I can't seem to get out of the formulaic thing. It's just how I am. But so I wanted something that was a little bit more exciting to, you know, while I'm actually making it, because, you know, deep in September in show season, all I do is make this mug and these vases, because those are my 2 top sellers. So, you know, I was getting a little tired of that. Not tired of it, just like, you know, I was like, oh, I would really love to do something that was a little, because, you know, when you're in college for art, you have all this time and you can just do whatever you want. People don't really understand that. Okay, this is the very exciting part. Let me make sure that the camera is like right on it. Is it right on it? Okay, here we go. Oh. Okay, so plaster is cheesy. You're on the back side, which is a little funky for me. I should also mention that this thing in my hand is left-handed. So if you're ever doing this, you have to make sure that you make it most likely right-handed, but maybe there's some lefties out there. So if I would have pulled the piece down before, or pulled that piece of PVC pipe off before it was ready, I would just have a puddle of plaster right now, which I have made work into trying to make it into a prototype, but it's really better if, is this visible? I hope this is visible.
Yeah, it is. We can see it.
Okay. So now it's really fast. So it's a lot of staring at it. I watch TV while I'm working. So it's a lot of staring at it, and then, you know, it's like, oh, I have that 3 minutes and here it goes. And if it, so I just cleaned that off in a bucket of water so that I can do sort of a final cut. So I'm running this tool along the piece of acrylic at the bottom. And a lot of the time I'll be like, okay, that's it. I'm not going to touch it anymore until I can sand it. So then I would sand the piece when it is set up. So that is dragging plaster. Woohoo, it worked. Here, let me flip this around.
We have a request. Can you show the bottom of the table?
Yeah. It's a kick wheel. There would be a seat right there. And, oh, hey, Jack Butler. And so that's just a piece of melamine that is bolted to the table. It used to just be sitting on there, and now it's bolted. So if I have a little time, I wanted to talk about other ways I make prototypes also. In instances when I can't drag plaster, I cannot drag this out of plaster. It will not work. I tried to drag this out of plaster and it ended up not working. I can't drag this out of plaster because it has a spout. So in those instances, I 3D print. So the one color vases that I make that are rather popular, those were all 3D printed at MakerWorks. And then the pink you're seeing is Bondo that I use to clean up the surface. The shaker was also 3D printed at MakerWorks because of this indent in the bottom so that it'll sit flat with the plug in it. And another thing that a lot of people don't realize is clay shrinks. So this is the fired piece and this is the prototype. I haven't put these next to each other until today. I can't even believe how much that shrunk. Because when I was printing this, everyone was like, that's giant. And I was like, oh, it's gonna shrink. And there it is. And then this guy, I also printed at MakerWorks. The printer was on the fritz, so there was a little bit of a hiccup where we had to stop here and print it again. But you know, it all worked out in the end. I just stuck it together with the Bondo. There it is. So again, you know, whenever I'm making prototypes, I'm like, oh my God, this is giant. And then it shrinks and I'm like, okay, it's fine. So here's some prototypes next to their perspective pieces. So anything that's white like this, I drug out of plaster. When I first made this line of work 2.5 years ago, I knew I wanted to make vases, but I was worried about being able to get the plaster to stick up. So when I drag vases, I put a piece of PVC pipe. I glue it to the table, and that holds the plaster up while I'm dragging it. So that is something that I adapted to this process. And then, so I make the prototype and then I make the mold. So here's all of this right here is what it takes to make this bowl. Same with that guy. So that's, any other questions? Am I going too fast? Let me flip around.
No, great. And it looks like we got through all of the questions that have popped up so far. So yeah, that was really awesome. And we still have a minute if there's anything that you want to show before we bring Amy back.
Okay, so I think I forgot to mention my handles. Oops, that's my finger. So my handles, I also 3D print. So it's a little bit more economical to 3D print a handle through a business called Shapeways. So I just send them the file and then they send me this handle. This handle was about $8. So it works better for that. If I was to send this to Shapeways to print it, it would cost like $400. Works perfectly for handles. This kind of stuff I print at MakerWorks. So this is the handle for my one color mug. So I get the handle and then I make a rubber mold of it. This is a crazy mold maker thing. And then I cast it in wax. And then I use that wax piece instead of the 3D printed handle to make the plaster mold that I use for the clay. Because it just works better to get this out of the mold than this. And then if anything happens to this, it doesn't matter because I can make an infinite number of them with my rubber mold. That's just what works for me. And, you know, mold makers are all kind of a little bit crazy. So, yeah. So, and then that's pretty much it. Did I show the So this guy is now, we're at 24 minutes, so it hasn't set up yet. It takes 30 minutes to set up, but you can see, you know, it's much harder now. And I wait until it's 30 minutes and then I would pop it off. So that's what's on the table. And I would kind of, yeah, it's not ready yet because it won't pop off. So, and then this stuff, you know, I've got the table covered in Murphy's oil soap, so that just sort of pops off also. Ta-da! Okay. Sorry, that's my finger. All right.
Well, thanks so much, Emily. That was really interesting to watch.
It worked out.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and bring Amy back up so we can see her one more time.
Whoops. Spilled my tea.
Whoops. Start video. Did it work?
Sort of.
And I spill tea on a regular basis, so it's good. I just spilled it in the paper.
Oh wait, we're still flipped. Hold on. Okay. We're still flipped.
There you are.
Already an hour.
Yeah. Yay, that was so cool. I've never seen that.
Yeah, it was so funny. Amy and I were both doing things that like we had never seen each other do.
Yeah.
Just because
that was part of your process I had never understood before. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. But I now know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. And you guys have like really great comments. So I hope you take a second to read through them before we leave. Everybody said really great things. And I think they were on the same page too. Like there was so much that we learned from both of your parts of your program. So just a reminder to everyone, I linked to both Amy and Emily's websites and Etsy page in the comment section. So go check out a little bit more of their work. And then we do this virtual art series every week. So we hope that you guys tune in on Thursday at 4 o'clock next week. We have a happy hour with artist Alan Boatwright. So, and if you go to our virtual art series Facebook page, which I will link to right now, you can get information on all of our upcoming events and Zoom links and all of that. So, so again, thank you guys. This was so much fun.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, and congratulations again to our winners of the Happy Little Videos competition. So thank you guys, and we hope everybody has a really great day.